It started with a joke I wasn't supposed to hear. She cried in the bathroom, over this? Laughter. Deep, guttural, the kind that slaps you in the face more than it ever touches your funny bone. I was standing by the copier, just around the corner. The paper tray had jammed again, the fourth time that morning, and as I wrestled with it, the voices from the break room floated out like poison gas. Familiar voices. One in particular. Martin. My boss. My jaw clenched. The toner smudged my fingers black as I gripped the side of the machine tighter. A fresh stab of embarrassment surged through my spine, hotter than shame and colder than humiliation. He knew. They all knew. I'd cried after the promotion announcement. Quietly, I thought. Discreetly. In the third-floor bathroom, stall number 2, door that always stuck. I thought I'd managed it with dignity, the kind where no one could see your lips tremble or hear your chest catch between sobs. But I was wrong. Again. Just like I was wrong about the promotion. I mean, Martin continued with that smug drawl of his, she's sweet, sure, works hard, but come on. She's not partner material. I didn't breathe. My lungs stopped, as if waiting for some external cue to allow them life again. My heart, however, had no such restraint. It thudded so hard in my chest I thought maybe they would hear timely time and next. Partner material. I pressed my hand against the copier, grounding myself, blinking hard until the stinging in my eyes faded. No more tears. Not here. Not again. I turned, walked away from the copier, and left the stack of misprinted client reports still stuck inside. I didn't care anymore. Because in that moment I knew something had shifted, not just in the office dynamics, not just in how I viewed Martin, but inside me, in the marrow of who I thought I was. And for once, I didn't try to fix it. I should have seen it coming. Every sign was there. Every Friday coffee meeting skipped. Every vague response to my progress updates. Every time Martin forgot to CC me in team-wide strategy threads. I told myself it was just an oversight, or that he was overwhelmed. But it wasn't that. He'd already chosen someone else. Jared. Fresh out of business school, confidence slick as oil, hair always too perfect. He wore his ambition like a tailored suit, and somehow it fit him better than any of us who'd been there longer, worked harder, delivered more. I had trained him, sat beside him for hours teaching him our proprietary software, walked him through our biggest clients' temperamental whims, helped rewrite his first few client pitches when he stumbled. He called me his work big sister. Then he got the promotion. I didn't even get a heads up. The day of the announcement, I wore my navy blazer, the one with the hidden inner pocket that made me feel quietly powerful. I'd gotten my nails done that week, spent too much money on a haircut that no one commented on. The conference room was full. Martin stood at the head of the table, smiling like a man who'd just won a bonus round. We're thrilled to announce a new partner joining the team, he said, clapping Jared on the back. I froze. No name, no warning, just clapping and camera flashes, and a few too many eyes shifting toward me, then shifting away just as quickly. I smiled. I applauded. I died. Then I excused myself to the bathroom and let the stall muffle my breathless gasps. And I cried. Not because I wasn't tough, but because I'd been tough for so long, and it hadn't mattered. I kept working, though. That's the thing about being underestimated. It doesn't always crush you. Sometimes it burns a hole through your chest and lets the truth in. I stopped volunteering for the late-night deck edits. I stopped bringing coffee to meetings I wasn't invited to. I stopped staying quiet when Jared fumbled in front of clients and turned to me with that helpless little look he thought I didn't notice. I made him sweat. And Martin? He noticed. Everything all right, Kala? He asked one Thursday, peering over the edge of my cubicle with forced casualness. Perfect, I said, not looking up. Just checking. You've been a little distant? I typed a little louder. Oh, I'm still here, just focused. You know, doing the work. He flinched. I smiled. By the time HR launched the anonymous employee climate survey, I was already planning my exit. I knew I wouldn't get credit for the Simmons account, even though it had been my pitch that closed it. I knew the new leadership training program was a PR stunt. I knew that if I stayed, I'd rot. So I applied. Discreetly. Strategically. Not out of desperation, but with the clinical calm of someone building a parachute out of silken spite. Every night I polished my portfolio, updated metrics, gathered testimonials from clients who thought I was already a partner. I didn't correct them. And the offers started coming. Not junior roles, not lateral moves. Executive positions, with equity. One even offered me full relocation, a signing bonus, and a seat on the board after year 1. But I wasn't done yet. Not until sideheads knew. I drafted the resignation letter on a Sunday, 3 sentences, crisp, unemotional, no accusations, just facts. I printed it on cream linen stock, folded it with surgical precision, sealed it in an envelope, carried it in my purse for 2 days. Then came the meeting. Martin had scheduled a touch base with me, likely to address my attitude, or what he'd no doubt describe as my recent chilliness. I showed up 5 minutes early. He was late. Of course. "Kala," he said, breezing in, sipping from that dumb stainless steel tumbler with a sticker that read, "Cabas-level expert." I smiled politely. He sat, flipped open his laptop. "So, I wanted to chat about how things have been going. You've been a bit withdrawn. Team morale is a priority, you know." I waited until he looked up. Then I placed the envelope on the table. His brow furrowed. "What's this?" "My resignation." "A beat." Then he laughed. Actually laughed. "Kala, come on, are you serious?" I didn't flinch. "Yes." He stopped laughing. "Is this about Jared? Look, I know that was tough, but..." "This is about me," I said, standing. "And what I won't tolerate anymore." He opened the envelope. Read. Pale bloomed beneath his tan. "Wait, you're leaving when? Asterisk?" 2 weeks. I'll send a transition doc by end of day." "But you haven't even talked to HR. There's a process." I tilted my head. "Oh, they'll hear from me. Don't worry." And as I walked out, I could almost hear the echo of his laugh shrinking behind me, swallowed by the weight of what he'd just lost. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. I don't remember the walk back to my desk. The floor beneath me may as well have been made of clouds or fire. My senses were overloaded. I could hear every breath, every fake cough, every mouse click in a 10-cubicle radius. Or maybe I heard nothing at all, because my blood was rushing, loud as thunder in my ears. My knees weren't shaking, though. Not anymore. I sat down, opened my inbox, and typed. My knees aided Dax's subject. Merrick Lachrext * transition plan. Merrick Lach body * attached is a preliminary outline of transition responsibilities for my current accounts. A full document will follow within 24 hours. Please let me know who should be looped in for client introductions. Purse, attachment, ***. Nothing yet. Just a placeholder. I hit send. Then I opened a fresh Word doc. At the top, I typed, "Transition plan, Calla Warner." I smiled. The act of naming myself gave me a strange sort of power. For 3 years, I'd been signing off emails with "warm regards" or "happy to help." And the truth was, I was neither. But this wasn't for them. This was mine. By lunchtime, the ripple had turned into a wave. "Did you hear?" a voice hissed across the aisle. I thought it was a joke. "But she actually resigned?" another whispered. I kept typing. Somewhere between bullet point 4 and 5 of the transition doc, my team's ping lit up with a private message from Jared. "Sums Jared N. ***. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. No. But of course I typed. Culla W. Asterisk, asterisk. Sure. 1:30 in the glass pod? Sure. Jared N. Asterisk, asterisk. Thanks. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Ha. The glass pod was a tiny conference room meant for two-person sinks. I'd done plenty of training sessions with Jared in there. He always sat too close, even when there were two chairs. He always borrowed my pen. He always found a way to compliment me that never quite sounded like a compliment. I was already inside when he arrived. I didn't bother to stand. Kala. Jared. He closed the door behind him. For once, he looked uncertain. I just wanted to say, I didn't know about the decision. Martin didn't loop me in until the announcement. I waited. And if I'd known, I would have said something. Still, I said nothing. He hated that. I mean, you were the one who, hell, I wouldn't even privy here without your help. You deserved it. Everyone knows that. I leaned back. Then why didn't you say anything after the announcement? You stood there and took the applause. I didn't want to make things worse. I tilted my head. Worse for who? He faltered. And there it was, the crack in his perfect shell. Jared wasn't evil. He was just opportunistic, a survivor, a climber. But I wasn't his rung anymore. That afternoon, HR reached out. A woman named Geneva requested a voluntary offboarding conversation. Geneva, with her immaculate grammar and overly sweet tone. I scheduled it for Friday. In the meantime, Martin sent a follow-up email, 2 sentences. Kala, asterisk. Kala, Aspis Kolo, would really like to discuss this further. Let me know if you're free to chat before Friday. Asterisk. Asterin, Naturi's time. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on my clients. Reyes & Sons, the real estate firm from Charlotte, called me directly. We heard the news, Mr. Reyes said. Is it true you're leaving? Yes, I said, in 2 weeks. He sighed. That's a damn shame. You were the only reason we stayed with the firm after the Q1 mess. I appreciate that. If you end up somewhere else, I hope you'll let us know. I smiled. I will. Thursday, around 4 p.m., my monitor flickered, then went black, then rebooted. When it came back on, my permissions had changed. My access to the partner drive was gone. My folder had been renamed to _former. Cute. No announcement had gone out yet, but someone had started pulling the administrative strings. Probably Martin. Probably Petty. Didn't matter. I plugged in my USB drive, downloaded only the materials legally mine, writing samples, performance reviews, certificates, the transition doc I had created. Nothing else. No sabotage, no revenge. Just extraction, like I was lifting a diamond out of a collapsing mine. Friday arrived with a damp chill in the air. My blouse stuck to my back under my blazer as I walked into the HR conference room. Geneva was already there, waiting with a laptop and a tightly organized folder. Kala, thank you for coming. Her voice was warm, too warm. I appreciate you agreeing to a formal exit interview. May I record this for internal purposes? Sure, I said. She clicked a button. The red light blinked. So, let's begin. Why are you leaving? I looked directly at her. I was passed over for a promotion I was told I was tracking toward. The decision was made without transparency, and the selection was someone I had personally mentored. I no longer believe there's a future here that aligns with my goals. Geneva nodded. She typed rapidly. Have you raised these concerns previously? I hesitated. Then, yes. In performance reviews, in one-on-ones, I expressed interest in leadership opportunities and I was told to be patient. And do you believe your gender or any other personal characteristic played a role in this outcome? Yes. Silence. Geneva blinked, then typed. I let her, because it was the truth. When I returned to my desk, a sticky note was waiting. From Martin. Moose, please swing by before EOD. Nope. I went home instead. And the next week, I did my job. exceptionally well. Tied up every loose thread, wrote introductions for all my clients, double-checked every shared folder, delivered 2 decks that had Jared's name on them, but were entirely my work. I didn't leave a mess. I left a vacuum. On my last day, Martin finally cornered me. I was in the mailroom printing my final expense report. He walked in, looking tired. Kala. I didn't look up. I just wanted to say... I turned. You don't need to. I do, he insisted. I didn't handle this well. I realize that now, and if you ever consider coming back, I won't. He paused. I meant what I said. You're a hard worker, a real asset. I picked up my envelope. I wasn't an asset. I was a foundation, and you never built anything on it. He didn't stop me as I walked out. The new job was in London. The office had tall windows and real coffee. My title was Executive Strategy Director. I had 3 direct reports and access to the board. I wore what I wanted. No one commented on my hair. In the first month, I led a pitch that closed a 7-figure client. They sent me flowers, with a card that said, Sopas hama Turks sama Turks, nung mais off Turks off her. Sopas hama Turks, welcome home. Bience. A few weeks later, I got a LinkedIn message. Mock some Turks, Jared N. Hired. Card some Turks, mock some Turks, Turks, mock some Turks, some Turks. Knock some Turks. If you're ever hiring, let me know. I didn't reply. Because I was busy. Building something real. With people who didn't laugh when I cried. With people who never made me beg to be seen. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. My new life began on a Monday. Not a symbolic Monday, not a perfect, sunny morning. It was cloudy, brisk, and my cab driver got lost twice on the way from Paddington. But it was my first day at a company that had not once asked me to prove my worth in silence. And that, I told myself as I stepped out onto the polished concrete steps of Morley & Howe Strategy Group, was already a win. The front doors opened like a theater curtain. Inside, sleek marble, soft accents, natural light. A receptionist who greeted me by name, not because she recognized me, but because she knew me. Welcome, Ms. Warner. They're expecting you upstairs. I thanked her, stepped into the elevator, and exhaled for the first time in months. The 12th floor opened into what looked like a design studio more than a boardroom. Whiteboards lined the walls, some half-scribbled, others tattooed with color-coded systems. The floor plan was open, yet it breathed. Everyone had space, real space. And there they were. The onboarding team, HR, my new manager, Dana Ashby. Dana had the kind of presence you noticed even in silence. She shook my hand, smiled genuinely, and said, "We don't expect miracles today, just curiosity." I hadn't realized how much I'd craved that, a space where curiosity wasn't punished. By week 2, I was neck-deep in the Hayburn Telecom proposal. Dana had brought me in, specifically because of my work with Simmons & Load. My approach to structuring legacy firms through digital transitions was one of the reasons Morley & Howe had poached me so aggressively. What she didn't know was that I'd done all of that while being told I was too ambitious, too intense, too eager. Here, those traits weren't liabilities. They were job requirements. I was in a strategy meeting on a rainy Wednesday, laying out a staggered client adoption model, when I heard Dana say something I'll never forget. Callous structure here is the backbone of our pitch. If they don't sign, it's because they don't deserve us. It was so casual, so natural, and I had to look away for a second. Because no one had ever stood behind my work like that. Not openly, not without a but. That weekend, I found a flat just off Notting Hill Gate. It was smaller than my old place but had high ceilings, a crooked fireplace, and light that poured in like honey. I bought a second-hand espresso machine, stocked the fridge with oat milk and sharp cheddar and local fruit. It wasn't home yet, but it was mine, and that meant everything. At the 3-month mark, the Hayburn deal closed. It was the largest contract Morley and Howe had signed that quarter, and I'd let it. Me. Not quietly, not behind someone else's curtain. We celebrated with champagne in the break room, real champagne, none of that Prosecco that tastes like regret nonsense. Dana raised her glass and said, "To Calla, may we always listen when she speaks." Everyone clapped. Someone whooped. I was laughing before I realized I'd started crying. Dana pulled me aside afterward. "That okay? The attention?" I nodded. I never had that before." She looked at me. "Well, get used to it." I received 3 recruiter messages the next week. I ignored them all. I wasn't going anywhere. Because here, I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't a mentor/convenient stepping stone. I wasn't told to be patient while others leapfrogged. Here, I was building. A team, a legacy, a future. My second hire was a woman named Cora, smart, funny, fiercely analytical. She reminded me of myself, back when I still hoped that merit alone would carry me forward. On her second day, she asked me outright, "What's the secret to making partner here?" I looked her in the eye. "Don't ask for permission to be excellent, just be excellent, loudly." She smiled, jotted it down. I wasn't just doing strategy anymore. I was shaping a culture. Around month 5, Martin sent a LinkedIn connection request. No message. Just the request. I left it there, pending. The same way he'd left my career potential, unacknowledged. Then came the panel. Morley and Howe was hosting a thought leadership summit on equity in leadership. Dana asked if I'd be one of the speakers. "Are you kidding?" I asked. "What would I even say?" She laughed. "Tell them the truth." So I did. The event hall was full, dozens of chairs filled, notebooks open, recorders on. I stood behind a sleek white podium, palms resting flat. "My name is Calla Warner," I began. And for a long time, I believed that if I kept my head down and worked hard, someone would eventually notice. Pause. They did, but not in the way I hoped. I told them about the bathroom, the laughter, the folded letter. I told them about the silence that followed, the weight of being useful but never powerful. I told them about leaving. And building. I ended with this. The moment I stopped asking to be seen and started building spaces where others had to see me, everything changed. And now my mission is to make sure no one else has to wait as long as I did. Applause. Real, not polite. I stepped down from the podium, a different person than when I'd stepped up. Later that evening, Dana and I had drinks on the rooftop. The London skyline glittered like a crown of silver and glass. She raised her glass. To being the boss you never had. I clinked mine against hers. To never looking back. Except I did, one more time. That night, I opened LinkedIn, scrolled through my old connections. Saw Jared's latest post about team leadership and mentorship. Saw Martin's status change. Consulting available, Dow's. Saw Geneva had left the company 2 months after I did. Then I closed the app. Because the story I was living now was better than anything I'd left behind. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. It was a Thursday when the call came. I was in the middle of a meeting with our legal compliance team about a new EU data directive when my personal phone buzzed once, then again, and again. 3 calls in 2 minutes, all from the same number. Unknown. But the country code was familiar. U.S. I silenced the phone and let the meeting finish. I didn't like distractions, not anymore, not when I had a team that respected every word I said. I wasn't about to let anyone, including a ghost from my past, take that from me. But when the meeting ended and I stepped into the quiet of my glass-walled office, I sat on the edge of the sofa and tapped redial. A woman answered on the second ring. "Is this Calla Warner?" Her voice was sharp, corporate, the kind of tone that carried spreadsheets and stress in equal measure. "Speaking." "Hi," This is Rebecca Dalton from Greystone Executive Search. I know this is out of the blue, but we were referred to you by a former client. Your name came up as someone who, well, fixes things. I didn't say anything. Specifically, she went on, we have a situation at a tech firm in Boston, internal leadership collapse, mismanagement, a lawsuit in progress. They're looking for interim leadership. Someone who can take the wheel for 6 months while they rebuild. High risk, high reward. And frankly, we were told you might be the only one who could handle it. I smiled, slowly. Who referred me? A Mr. Reyes. Of course. I didn't accept the offer. Not at first. But I didn't say no either. Instead, I flew to Boston that weekend under the guise of visiting old friends, walked by the waterfront, took meetings in hidden cafes, let them wine and dine me with more desperation than charm. And then I met the founder, Sarah Cheng. Brilliant, burned out, clutching the pieces of a company that had once been worth 9 figures, and now couldn't keep an operations director for more than 4 months. I listened. For 2 hours, I let her talk. I watched the words spill out of her like a dam had cracked. Her board had turned on her. Her team no longer trusted her. The product team had jumped ship to a competitor in San Jose. She wasn't asking me to save her company. She was asking me to teach her how to save it herself. That night, I sat in my hotel room overlooking the wharf, watching the lights ripple across the black water. And I called Dana. Tell me why I shouldn't take it, I said. She laughed. Because we'll miss you. Because you've built something here. Because I'm selfish. That's not enough. No, she said. But it's true. Also true. I knew when I hired you that we wouldn't get to keep you forever. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Then I'll make sure it's worth it. 6 weeks later, I was living in a downtown loft in Boston. 6 months. That was the deal. One woman, one crisis, one chance to turn chaos into clarity. Sarah and I worked 12-hour days. I rebuilt the hiring pipeline from scratch. I flew in experts from 4 different time zones to teach the remaining staff what they'd never been trained to do. I let go of people who needed to be let go, hired those who'd never had a chance to shine. And then I did the one thing that surprised even myself. I brought in Cora. Back in London, she was thriving, but she was ready for more, and I knew this could be it. I called her late one night. She answered, groggy. Are you asking me to move to Boston? Temporarily. 6 months. You'd double your salary, and you'd be building from the ground up. She didn't hesitate. Send the contract. Watching her walk into the Boston office was like seeing the future I'd always wanted to live in. She didn't ask for permission. She asked for floor plans. And people. And data. Sarah looked at me after their first meeting and said, You're building an army. No, I said, I'm building a legacy. One day, 4 months into the rebuild, I walked into the main conference room to find Sarah sitting alone at the head of the table. You okay? She looked up at me, eyes wide. You've done it. Done what? Fixed it. I shook my head. No, you did. I just held the mirror. The lawsuit was settled. The ex-CFO was disbarred from serving in leadership positions. Morale rose. Turnover dropped. Our Series D pitch deck was sent out with confidence. And just before Christmas, Sarah offered me the role permanently. Chief Operating Officer. Full equity. Board seat. I said no, because it wasn't mine to keep. But I want you on the board, she said, as an advisor. That I accepted. Because I could still be part of the future without owning it. I returned to London on a windy January morning. Dana met me at Heathrow with a hug that nearly cracked my ribs. You look tired, but powerful tired. It's the Cora effect. She'll probably be running the place by next week. Good, Dana said. Then we can finally go on that retreat. I blinked. Retreat? Morley and Howe is sending our leadership team to Iceland, strategy off-site, but mostly spas and saunas. You in? I laughed. And that night, I booked my flight. Because sometimes, rebuilding means remembering you're allowed to rest. 3 weeks later, in a geothermal spa tucked into the rocks near Grindavik, I sat with Dana and Cora as snow drifted in soft curtains around us. Cora raised a glass of something pink and fizzy. To Kala, for showing us what happens when women refuse to be stepped on. Dana grinned. And for stepping up instead? I didn't toast. I just closed my eyes, let the warmth soak into every scar, and whispered to myself, we're just getting started. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The emails started coming in faster than I could read them. After Iceland, something shifted. I wasn't just known within our ecosystem. I was being talked about in circles I'd never even stepped into. An interview I gave during the Equity Summit went viral, reposted by a female founder group with millions of followers. The quote they highlighted? None is asterisk. You're not too ambitious. They're just too comfortable. Asterisk. Suddenly, the world wanted more of me. More panels, more strategy consults, more leadership workshops for high-potential women who had never been told they were allowed to take up space. Dana was the one who saw it coming. Kala, she said one morning, over oat flat whites in our usual Soho cafe, you're not just building things now, you're becoming the blueprint. I looked at her, stunned. Because deep down, part of me still felt like the woman gripping the copier tray in a too-tight blazer, trying not to cry. By March, I had 3 standing offers to write a book. One from a boutique publisher in Edinburgh, one from a giant New York house, one from a radical press in Berlin that wanted to call it Burn the Ladder. Dana and I spent a weekend locked in a cottage in the Cotswolds going over the contracts. You need to ask yourself, she said, perched by the fireplace, what this book actually is. Is it a memoir? A manual? A reckoning? Yes, I said. All of it. So I chose the New York house. Not because they had the biggest budget, but because they promised me full control. I hired a ghost editor. Not a ghostwriter, I didn't need anyone to write my voice. But I needed someone to hold me accountable. Because telling the truth, once you've survived it, can feel like betrayal. Even when the truth is your freedom. The book took 7 months. I wrote every morning from 5 to 8, before the workday started. I wrote from hotel rooms and airport lounges and studio apartments with bad plumbing. I wrote on red-eye flights between Brussels and Austin, and I wrote during an unexpected layover in Dubai where I caught the flu and couldn't stop shivering. But I finished it. Title: Unapologetic Architecture, Building the Career They Said You Couldn't. Chapters included. They called it soft skills, so I weaponized them. Times, you don't need permission to lead. Times, when the mentor becomes the threat. Times, a blueprint isn't a cage. And the final chapter. Times, how to build a world that doesn't need you. We launched in the fall. At a packed theater in Covent Garden. The event was part TED Talk, part revival meeting. I wore a blazer the color of blood, silk-lined, structured, sharp, the line of women outside wrapped around the block. When I stepped on stage, I wasn't afraid. Because this time, I wasn't asking to be seen. I was reflecting what they already knew in their bones. That we are more than the boxes they hand us. We are the architects now. Black. The book hit international bestseller lists within a week. The Berlin press sent me a basket of peonies with a handwritten note. Danke für das Feuer. Thank you for the fire. Cora flew in from New York to surprise me at the Paris signing. She cried. I did too. Because once, we'd just been 2 women trying to survive in rooms designed to erase us. And now, we were designing the rooms. Then came the board offers. 4 in total, 3 from tech firms, 1 from a fashion house with a notorious CEO. I said yes to 2. And no to the one that still didn't have a maternity policy. You think you can say no to us? The recruiter asked. I smiled. I know I can. And then the video surfaced. I wasn't tagged at first, but someone sent it to me. A snippet from a grainy private conference in Chicago. Martin, speaking to a room of startup founders about leadership resilience. I had a former employee once who stormed out because she didn't get a promotion. Emotional types. Great on paper, not always cut out for real leadership. The rage was immediate. People recognized me from the book, from the panels, from the quote. They tagged me. They rallied. And I did nothing. Because I didn't have to. He issued a public apology within 48 hours. Corporate speak. Hollow. But that wasn't the point. The point was, he wasn't untouchable anymore. A month later, I got an email. Subject line, from one Kala to another. It was from a young analyst in Pittsburgh. Her name was Kala, too. She'd read the book, followed the story. She'd almost quit her job after being passed over twice. But she didn't. Instead, she started a mentorship program at her company. 12 women joined in the first week. Her email ended with, Times asterisk. You gave me a map. Now I'm building roads. Asterisk. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I hit reply. Times asterisk. Build fast. Build loud. I've got your back. Asterisk. I was in Copenhagen when Dana called. You're going to hate this, she said, but Forbes wants to name you Woman of the Year. Why would I hate that? Because they want to do a full feature, including your old firm, including Martin. My stomach twisted. Do they want his perspective? They asked. We said no, it's your story, not his. I breathed out slowly. Then let's do it. The feature was honest. Painful. Unflinching. They used a photo of me sitting on the edge of a conference table, laughing, heels off, shirt sleeves rolled. The caption read, Nice asterisk. She built the ladder. Then she burned it. Then she built a bridge. At the awards gala, as I stood holding the glass plaque that glittered like armor, I closed my eyes. And I saw her. That woman in the blazer. The one standing by the copier, ink on her fingers, heartbroken. I wanted to go back to her. I wanted to say, hold on, you have no idea who you're going to become. But I couldn't go back. So I went forward. Always forward. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. It was a rainy Tuesday in Amsterdam when the idea finally took shape. Not a small drizzle either. It was the kind of rain that rearranges your plans and makes you stare out of tall hotel windows, wondering how you ever thought you could rest. Cora and I had just wrapped a keynote at the Global Women in Business Forum. I was supposed to be on a flight back to London by nightfall. But the storm grounded every outgoing plane for the next 24 hours. We sat barefoot on the window seat of my corner suite, a bottle of elderflower tonic between us, legs tucked under borrowed hotel robes. And Cora, ever impatient with wasted time, looked at me and said, Why aren't we doing more? I blinked. We saw her doing more. We're doing everything. Yeah, but it's all borrowed. They're boards. They're platforms. They're gate-kept institutions. What if we built one ourselves? Something no one could take? I didn't reply. Not immediately. But my mind, that restless machine, was already moving. By the time the weather cleared, we had a name. Times, the Warner Foundation. Tagline, build loud, lift louder. Not a nonprofit. Not exactly. A catalytic initiative. A fund. A launch pad. A mentorship ecosystem. A grants program. A war cry. We structured it as a hybrid, part social impact trust, part venture platform, part educational engine, fully autonomous, fully female-led, fully ours. We launched it 4 months later with £10 million in seed from private partners and values-aligned angels. The announcement broke every metric we had. Within the first month, 1,300 applications flooded our inbox. Young founders, veteran executives, mothers returning to the workforce, teenagers with prototypes drawn on napkins. Every industry, every continent. We couldn't fund them all, but we could listen. And we did. We built a triage team, designed a fast grant track, partnered with universities, brought in corporate sponsors who promised to write checks and stay quiet. Because this wasn't about visibility. It was about propulsion. One of our first grantees was a woman named Amira, 23, Algerian-British, engineer. She had built a water filtration prototype that could purify storm runoff using modified algae cells. She'd been rejected by 6 accelerators. One told her it was too technical for a woman-led team. We flew her to Oslo, put her in front of a panel of scientists who actually listened. 6 months later, she had a patent. 8 months later, she had a deal with the UN. A year later, she was speaking beside me on a climate tech panel in Singapore. Her closing remark? I used to think I needed someone to rescue me. Turns out I just needed someone to believe me. I looked at her, smiling. Now you are the rescue. Cora expanded our platform into Latin America. I led the EMEA chapters. Dana, now full-time on our board, created a private executive retreat program for women at the top who had no one to talk to. We called it Summitless, because some of us were still climbing, and some of us were learning to fly. The foundation became a movement. Not overnight, but steadily. We didn't build a brand. We built Stummafor Trust, Vectalis. And in doing so, we built something no gatekeeper could dismantle. 2 years in, we hosted our first international summit. Lisbon. Sea breezes. Stone courtyards, 60 countries represented. The final day, we held an open mic. Anyone could come up, speak, share, cry, brag, ask. Halfway through, a woman in a lavender hijab stood. Her name was Samira. She was a cybersecurity lead from Jordan. She said, I want to thank whoever made the decision that let someone like Shimimi Satz be here, because I've spent my life hearing no. And today, I finally feel like a yes. The room went quiet, then erupted. We all stood. No one told us to. That night, back in my hotel room, I opened a bottle of red and sat on the balcony until 2 a.m. My inbox was overflowing again. Requests. Gratitude. Proposals. But tucked between them was one I hadn't expected. Nice subject. *** speaker invite. Harvard Business School Spring Lecture Series. Nice tie, body. ***. We'd be honored to have you as our closing keynote. The graduating class has requested you specifically. Full travel and honorarium included. Topic at your discretion. I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because once upon a time Martin had said, Kala's not really HBS material. I clicked reply. Namshur Pinko subject, ***, re, speaker invite. Namshur Pinko subject, ***, I'd be honored. See you in April. The lecture hall was packed. More than 200 students. Cameras, lights. I didn't use slides. I didn't bring a script. I stood center stage in a black turtleneck and navy slacks and said, here's what they won't tell you in these halls. Leadership isn't about who gets the chair. It's about who gets back up when the chair is pulled away. They didn't blink. So I gave them the rest. Afterward, a woman approached me. Late 50s, faculty badge. You don't know me, she said, but I knew Martin. Years ago, we overlapped in a prior firm. I waited. He told people you were emotional, that you cried, that you couldn't handle pressure. I did cry, I said. She nodded. That's what makes you better. Quote. I flew back to London the next day with a new offer in my inbox. The World Economic Council, advisory chair. Not honorary, not token. Real power, real strategy, real seat. I said yes, but with conditions. Full transparency, full funding for women-led research. Annual open access report. They agreed. I drafted my speech in the back of the car, driving from Heathrow to my Notting Hill flat. And when I got home, I set my bag down, pulled off my boots, and cried. Not because I was tired. Because I was whole. Because the world had tried to convince me I wasn't enough. And I had become certain more than they could imagine. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It began with a knock. Not metaphorical. Not a polite calendar ping or a chime from my notifications. An actual knock on the door. It was a Saturday morning just shy of 8 a.m., and I was in my robe, cradling a mug of cardamom tea, standing in the hallway of my Notting Hill flat, wondering who in the world had the audacity to show up unannounced. I opened the door. It was Cora. Wind-blown, sleepless, eyes wild. "She's here," she said. I blinked. "Who's here?" She held up her phone. A grainy CCTV still, pulled from a late-night security feed at the Warner Foundation's Johannesburg chapter. A girl. No more than 19. Short locks. Worn sneakers. A backpack covered in campaign pins, standing at our gate, looking up at the emblem etched in the stone archway. "She walked 3 days," Cora said, "from her village, slept outside our office last night. When they asked why she came, she said, 'Because I need to change something, and no one else will let me try.' I sat down. Because I knew what that hunger felt like. Because I had walked my own version of those miles. Because this was the moment we'd always dreamed of." Her name was Ayanda. No last name, at least not one she used. Born in rural Free State province. Raised by a grandmother who taught her how to fix bicycles, barter in 3 dialects, and never accept silence when questions could be asked. She had hacked a defunct school computer to design an education app that worked offline. She had a dream, put it in the hands of every child like her. No budget, no coding team, just blueprints. And resolve. "I don't want a grant," she told our Johannesburg director. "I want a mentor. I want the steps. Then I'll do the rest myself." She got both. Within 4 weeks, Ayanda had a prototype. We paired her with a dev team in Nairobi, gave her a refurbished tablet, set up a data scientist to advise her on user testing. 3 months in, she presented her demo to our full global board. "We don't need pity," she said. "We need infrastructure. Give us the tools, not the handouts. We'll build our own ladders." By the end of her presentation, no one blinked. We just stood. Again. Mouth hand. Watching Ayanda was like staring into the sun. Raw, untamed, blinding. And it changed everything. Because for the first time, I saw it clearly. We didn't just need to lift Komi women. We needed to lift girls. We needed a second pillar. We called it Times Warner Future, Times Monkritan. Not an incubator, not a school. A Times launch system. Pop-up campuses, mobile labs, mentorship pods. All designed for girls aged 14 to 21, who had been left out, or never counted to begin with. We built in Kenya, Bangladesh, Haiti, Albania, Appalachia. We built quietly. Until we didn't. The global press caught wind 6 months in. Time magazine called it the loudest revolution led by the youngest voices. Ayanda's photo was on the cover. Not mine. That was intentional. And long overdue. The first Warner Future Summit took place in Kigali. 200 girls from across the world. Workshops in the day. Fireside sessions at night. No hierarchy. No keynote stages. Everyone sat on the floor, ate the same meals, shared the same sleeping quarters. At the closing circle, a girl named Luna from Brazil stood and said, "When I go home, I will not shrink to fit. I will not wait to be allowed. I will not ask again." The room went still. Then Cora, our fearless, loudest, unrelenting Cora, stood up and shouted, "Then we'll follow you." I started traveling less. I didn't need to be everywhere anymore. Because they were. Ayanda launched her app under a new name, Sneedtika Sneech, Flair, Sneedti. By year's end, it was operating in 4 countries, 40,000 users. She turned down 2 acquisition offers. She joined our board at 21, the youngest voice we'd ever had, and the clearest. In London, I moved into a smaller place. Fewer rooms, more plants, floor-to-ceiling windows. I wrote a second book. Title, Legacy Isn't Quiet. It opened with this line. They said I was too emotional, so I gave them a world worth crying over. One day, I got an email. Subject, 10-year high school reunion, RSVP. I laughed. Not because I was above it, but because I had finally become the person I'd once hoped they'd remember me as. So I went. Wore crimson velvet. And when someone said, I always knew you'd do something impressive, I smiled and said I didn't. Because that was the truth. I hadn't known. But I'd kept going. And now, here we were. Warner Future became a continent-spanning network. Ayanda became its global director. Cora, ever restless, took a sabbatical to write her own book. Dana ran for public office in the UK, won in a landslide. I stepped down from daily operations. Because the house was standing. Because the girls were flying. And because legacy is not meant to be owned. It's meant to be passed on. I still wake up early. Still drink cardamom tea. Still answer the occasional mentorship call, or consult on a strategy, or surprise a new team with a visit. But I also paint. Terribly. I also take long walks in the park and name the squirrels. And I keep a notebook by the window. Because sometimes, the next revolution starts with a knock. And I want to be ready. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. It was a strange thing, waking up one morning and realizing that the world you dreamed of was finally beginning to exist. Not entirely, not everywhere, but piece by piece, pocket by pocket, like spring thawing out the last edges of a long, cruel winter. That morning I sat on my terrace, a shawl around my shoulders, watching the sun rise over the Thames. A pigeon landed on the railing. I didn't shoo it away. My phone vibrated. 1 buzz, then another, then 7. I turned it over. Breaking news alert. Nice Prime Minister names Warner as Special UN Liaison on Gender Equity and Economic Growth. I blinked. Because even though I'd been briefed, had taken the meetings, met the envoys, read the drafts, I hadn't expected this. Public, global, political. I made tea. Then I called Dana. I thought you'd already seen it, she said the moment she picked up. They've been sitting on the announcement for a week. And you knew? You're a strategic asset now, Kala. They don't get to make noise without checking where you're standing. I sat in silence. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because the 26-year-old version of me was still somewhere in my ribs, sobbing quietly behind a bathroom door, wondering how she'd keep surviving an office that laughed when she cried. And now, here I was, holding the pen that would help shape policy for millions. The UN role was part ceremonial, part tactical. I wasn't replacing a politician. I was becoming the signal. The person who knew what it felt like to be denied a seat, and who now built better tables. My first assignment was the Lagos Declaration, a summit designed to restructure how aid and investment intersected with female-led enterprise. Cora flew in from New York. Ayanda was already on the ground. We didn't host it in a gilded hotel or an elite campus. We held it in a newly funded community center, painted in bold murals by the girls of Warner Future Nigeria. Ayanda opened the event. We are not here to ask, we are here to design. And we did. We rewrote loan criteria. We replaced capacity building with capacity trusting. We implemented a clause that required 30% of all venture funds deployed under the initiative to go toward rural and refugee-led businesses. The press hated it. Investors called it reckless. But the impact spoke louder than the noise. 3 months later, the first reports came in. An increase in micro-entrepreneurship by 42% in 5 key regions. A 60% drop in program attrition. One of our first grantees, a Sudanese mother of 4, scaled her community solar project and hired 12 other women. When a BBC reporter asked how she did it, she laughed and said, "I stopped asking my husband and started asking myself." That clip went viral. Meanwhile, back in London, the Warner Foundation outgrew its original space. We moved into a converted historic courthouse. Symbolism? Absolutely. The plaque above the old entrance had once read, "Justice is blind." We added a second line beneath it. But we're not. I spent the better part of the next year traveling. Rwanda, Ecuador, Malaysia, Detroit. Everywhere I went, I met women who didn't just survive the systems designed to erase them, they redesigned those systems from the ground up. A former child bride in Gujarat who ran a chain of coding academies. A trans activist in Berlin who taught digital sovereignty workshops to refugee teens. A 68-year-old carpenter in Belfast who used her pension to start a tool library for young girls. We didn't need saviors. We needed samplifiers, Nance. So I turned the spotlight away from me and toward them. The second book tour was even bigger than the first. Psy Legacy isn't quiet hit shelves in 19 languages. I did a segment with NPR. The host asked, "What's the biggest lesson you've learned in the last 5 years?" I thought about it. Then I said, "That revenge is loud, but impact is louder." Asterisk. One night, alone in my flat, I found a letter tucked into a package of reader mail. No return address. Inside, a single sheet. Asterisk, Kala. You were right. They needed you more than they ever admitted. I hope, someday, I'm someone worth following. Masterisk. I read it twice, then burned it in the sink. Because closure doesn't always require witnesses. On the anniversary of Warner Future, we hosted a global live stream. Simultaneous events in 12 countries. 40,000 girls logged on. I sat at the London Broadcast Centre, mic clipped to my collar, camera focused. "I want you to know," I said, voice steady, "you don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You don't need to be palatable to be worthy. And you don't need anyone's permission to begin." Ayanda joined me on stage. We held hands. And she said, "We're not the next generation. We're the now generation." They cheered. And for a moment, I forgot every boardroom that told me I wasn't ready. Because they were ready. And that was all that mattered. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The stage was a circle. Not a square, not a podium, not some elevated platform where one person towers above the rest. It was circular, intentional, open, democratic. We built it that way. And it sat at the center of the Arena di Verona. Yes, not of Verona. The Roman amphitheater, centuries old, home of opera and echoes and blood-stitched history. Tonight, it would hold something different. The 10-year anniversary of the Warner Foundation. 24,000 people in the audience. Millions streaming from every continent. And I stood beneath the lights, barefoot, spine tall, heart quiet, knowing I was no longer the story. Just its beginning. We called it Klockstenart, the Circle Summit. The idea was simple. 10 years, 10 voices, 1 circle. Each voice was a girl who had once walked through the doors of Warner Future with nothing but grit and a dream. Now, they were founders, inventors, lawmakers, architects, animators, researchers, revolutionaries. I wasn't speaking tonight. I was listening. And I was proud. The first to speak was Kiara, from El Paso. At 16, she'd coded an app that let undocumented youth anonymously access legal aid. At 26, she'd testified before Congress. "I don't owe anyone my silence," she said, voice reverberating off limestone. "I don't owe them my shame. But I do owe the next girl a map. And this," she gestured to the crowd, "is the map." The second was May from Taipei. who had engineered a wearable device that translated emotional shifts in nonverbal children into color-coded light pulses. She didn't speak on stage. She signed. And the arena watched in perfect, trembling stillness as the overhead lights shifted from red to blue to yellow, narrating her words. When the 10th voice, Luna from Sao Paulo, finished her story, the circle dimmed. And that's when they turned to me. 10 women. 10 miracles. And in the silence they spoke together. Kala, come stand with us. My feet moved before my mind could. I stepped into the center of the circle. Not as a founder. Not as a speaker. As a Turfy's witness. To what had grown beyond me. To what no longer needed my protection. After the summit, I didn't go to the after-party. I walked alone through the ancient alleys of Verona, heels in hand, breeze soft against my face. And for the first time in years, I felt something deeper than peace. I felt shower a strophic release. The following week, I turned in my final leadership duties. Cora would take my place as chair. Ayanda would helm the strategy division. And I, Kala Warner, would become founding advisor. No desk. No inbox. Just presence. And permission to rest. I moved to Florence. Bought a quiet cottage on a hill covered in wild rosemary. The room smelled of earth and ink. And there, at last, I began to write the story I'd never dared to before. The fiction. The girl who never made it out. The story of who I could have been if the world had won. Because someone, somewhere, needed to know how close it all came to never happening. One afternoon, while wandering the San Lorenzo market, a girl approached me. Dark curls, bright eyes, backpack filled with books and nothing else. "Scusi," she said, "you're Kala, aren't you?" I nodded. She hesitated, then pulled out a notebook, showed me a sketch. A circle. "It's for my thesis," she said. "Architecture for Equity. I watched Verona 10 times. It changed my career." Quote. I smiled. Took the pencil from her hand. Added a tiny bridge to her circle. "Make sure it connects," I said. "Don't just make the stage. Make sure they can get there." She nodded like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. I still wake early. Still walk the olive groves at dawn. Still open my inbox on Sundays to find stories from places I've never been, thanking me for a ripple I didn't know I caused. But I don't lead anymore. I crevel plans so witness. I crevel bless, I celebrate. Because the world we dreamed of is here. And the girls are still building. Still burning. Still becoming. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. They called it the last mission. But that wasn't true. Because stories don't end when you stop showing up to the podium. They just shift. The way tide becomes current, the way breath becomes wind. Still, that's what the press called it. Tom's 100th The Last Mission. Warner returns for one final initiative. It wasn't planned. I was retired. Out of the spotlight, my mornings belonged to dew-covered vineyards and old books with cracked spines. But then came the fire. It started in Moldova. A Warner Future Lab, one of our mobile hubs, burned down overnight. No one hurt, but everything lost. Computers, prototypes, records, dreams. Arson, they said, politically motivated. Some small group didn't like what we were building, or who we were building it for. We'd seen resistance before, backlash, institutional sabotage, but never violence. Ayanda called me that night. Her voice was tight. "They think if they scorch the ground, we won't grow back." I sat on the edge of my bed, heart heavy, the Tuscan moon pouring gold across the floor. "We'll build something bigger," I said. We called it Summon to Scenics, a network of indestructible labs, built underground, mobile, digital, solar-powered, designed to activate in regions facing censorship, crisis, collapse. Part tech, part education, part shelter. Each Phoenix site would be self-reliant, Each girl trained in it would become a conduit. We wouldn't fight fire with fire. We'd fight it with resilience. I flew to Warsaw, not because I had to, but because I needed to. The lab there was the first test site, hidden beneath an old post office, shielded by thick concrete and deeper purpose. The opening ceremony was secret. Only 15 people. One of them, a girl named Alina, who had risked prison time to bring internet access to rural schoolchildren. She looked at me, eyes defiant. "They think we're just girls with dreams," she said, "but we're architects with blueprints." I laughed. "Then let's build." Bang. Phoenix spread like a whisper. Jordan, Sudan, Venezuela, Belarus, Myanmar. Each location powered by anonymity and community. The official press barely noticed, but the underground networks did. And in less than a year, over 100,000 girls had accessed Phoenix tools. Some to learn, some to teach, some to escape, all to begin. Chakras, Mio. I returned to London one last time. The old courthouse, our headquarters, had been restored to its full Victorian glory. Ayanda met me on the steps. "You're a ghost here now," she joked. "Then let me haunt with purpose." Inside, the new team buzzed like a hive. I saw faces I didn't know, and that made me proud. Because it meant the foundation had outlived me. As it should. Phoenix was now its own entity. Cora chaired the oversight committee. Alina joined as regional coordinator. We opened an archive. Every girl who passed through Phoenix would leave behind a trace, a photo, a quote, a drawing. We didn't store statistics. We stored souls. Then came the letter. Handwritten, delivered by courier. From the Secretary General. Requesting my presence at the Global Stability Forum in Geneva. To present Phoenix. To explain how a network built by teenage girls was succeeding where governments had failed. I almost said no. But Ayanda called me. "You always said we didn't need saviors. Just signals. Be the signal one more time." Geneva. Spotlights. Glass corridors. UN flags fluttering like indifferent doves. I walked to the podium in silence. Held no notes. Wore no brand. Just a pendant. The Phoenix emblem. Cast in obsidian. "I am not here to defend what we've built," I began. "I'm here to declare that the age of permission is over." Some clapped. Some stared. I didn't care. I told them about fire, and how we walked through it. I told them about Elina, about Ayanda, about the others. "The future does not arrive politely," I said. "It arrives because we built it." The hall stood. Not all, but enough. That night, I returned to Florence. My neighbors had left olives by my door. I sat by the fireplace, rereading the speech. Then I burned it. Let it rise in smoke. Like every version of me that had come before. Because I was done speaking for the girls. They had their own voices now. And they were louder than ever. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Autumn came early that year. In Florence, the olives fell weeks before the harvest was due. The vines shifted into rust and umber. The hills moved slower. The markets quieter. And for the first time since I could remember, I did not feel pulled. Not toward work. Not toward legacy. Not toward the endless rising of some new ladder that demanded I climb it. I felt still, which terrified me. I took long walks into the city. Not for meetings, not for interviews, just to see times. To watch the artists sketch on the Ponte Vecchio, to hear the bell towers argue with pigeons, to remember how to exist without agenda. And it was during one of those aimless walks, at the edge of the Arno, that I ran into her. A girl, maybe 17, leather-bound sketchpad under one arm, mismatched boots, and a face I recognized. Not literally, but spiritually. That mix of fear and fire. She was trying to draw the old bridge, crying. I sat beside her on the bench. Perspective is cruel, I said. She startled, then nodded. It never looks like what I feel. It always looks smaller. I reached into my satchel, handed her a pen. Try again. Make it look like what it is, asterisk not what it's supposed to be. She blinked, drew, this time wild, out of proportion, grand. It was magnificent. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "Are you?" I smiled. "Not today. Today I'm just someone who remembers trying." That moment shifted something. Because maybe I wasn't meant to vanish. Maybe stillness wasn't absence. Maybe it was presence. The next morning, I opened an old journal. One from my first month in London. Inside, a list. Things I want, but am afraid to want, asterisk. Times a life without apology. Times a home with too many windows. Times a laugh without checking who's watching. Times to dance in a room where no one knows my name. I stared at the last line for a long time. Then I booked a train to Marseille. The dance hall was tucked behind a market, 2 blocks from the sea. No signage, no tourists, just music. And for 3 hours I moved. With strangers, with rhythm, with freedom. No one knew my name. No one asked. And for the first time in decades, I felt whole. I returned to Florence with dirt on my shoes and salt in my lungs. And I began to host. Small dinners, artists, founders, activists, teenagers, widows, poets, farmers. Not summits, not panels, just meals. Around one long table under the grapevines. We called it Nabtarch Dunal and Nabtarch, the quiet circle. Each person brought a story. Each story brought an echo. We talked about things no press release could hold, like loneliness and anger, and how we heal from being believed too late. Cora came to visit. She brought her wife, her son. They stayed in the old guest house I'd barely used. We drank too much, laughed until our ribs ached. And at one point, her son looked up from his pasta and said, "My mom says you started the whole thing, the girl thing. Is that true?" I looked at him, 9 and messy and bold. And I said, "I didn't start it. I just stopped telling them to wait." Ayanda sent a letter. Paper, ink, no subject line. Inside, she wrote, "Times asterisk. We've built the last piece. Warner Future will become fully girl-run next year. No adult oversight. No more outside boards. They're ready. And we're grateful. Come see, if you'd like. But only if it fills you. Asterisk." I wept. Because I wasn't needed. And that was the greatest victory. Geneva called again. Another speech. This time I said no. No explanation. Just no. And it felt like oxygen. I adopted a dog. A mutt with 3 legs and a howl that could split thunder. I named her Sketchtours. She followed me everywhere. Especially into the studio, where I now painted daily. Badly. Bravely. I painted girls on rooftops. Girls in orbit. Girls laughing with their mouths open wide enough to swallow shame. One day, a knock on the door. A courier. Package from the British Museum. Inside, a bronze plaque. Kanamshukt Warner Archive of Leadership and Reclamation, Room 17, East Wing. Permanent. I laughed. Because if they'd told me that at 25, I would have crumbled. Now, I hung it on my garden wall. Let the ivy climb it. Let the bees rest there. I wrote a 3rd book. Fiction. Pure fantasy. Title: She Who Dared the Mountain. About a girl who refused the crown, built a library, and lived a long, soft life. It didn't hit any bestseller lists, didn't go viral, but letters poured in. Girls who said, asterisk, I didn't know I was allowed to want peace. Asterisk. Now they did. I spent a birthday alone. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I took sketch to the sea, ate cake on the shore, wrote one sentence in the sand. Club 4 asterisk, we arrived. Asterisk. Then I watched the tide take it, smiling, because what we built wasn't meant to be static. It was meant to be alive. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The day I knew it was truly the end didn't come with a bang, or a letter, or some grand crescendo of finality. It came with a sunrise, one I had watched before, hundreds of times in fact. But this time it looked different. Or maybe Toon did. The sky over the hills of Tuscany turned lavender and gold, and for once I didn't reach for my notebook. I didn't feel the need to write it down, record it, preserve it. I just watched. And that's when I knew. The story was over. Not the world, not the work. Just Hamtai telling of it. It began with a request from Ayanda. A final convening. Not for the press, not for the platforms, just us. The original circle. 10 of us. The women who had stood in the Verona amphitheater a lifetime ago. A reunion. She wrote, Times asterisk, we've scattered, but we are still sisters. Come back. One last circle. No agenda, just presence. Asterisk. I said yes. Lankly, we met in Morocco. Outside Essaouira, by the sea. A rented riad with mosaic floors and endless sky. No assistance, no itinerary. Just meals, firelight, memory. We laughed harder than we cried, but we cried too. Talked about the betrayals we'd forgiven. The dreams that had shifted. The softness we had finally allowed ourselves to hold. Luna now ran an institute for healing-based justice. Chiara had adopted 2 children. May was working on technology that interpreted animal distress signals into human frequency ranges. Ayanda was in love. Not with a person, but with peace. On the 3rd night, someone brought out a bottle of ink, a brush, and a roll of handmade paper. One by one, we wrote our names. Not the ones the world had known, but the ones we whispered to ourselves when we were alone. Mine was the girl who walked away from the fire, then taught others how to carry water. We didn't frame the scroll. We buried it beneath the oldest tree in the courtyard. A ritual, a release, a remembering. After the trip, I returned to Florence. Sketch had aged. She didn't run anymore, but she still followed me from room to room, stubborn as ever. I built her a ramp to the garden. We watched the stars together. The same ones that had always been there. Only now I had the time to see them. One day I received a small box. No note, no return address. Inside, a tiny glass sculpture. A girl, 1 foot forward, 1 hand raised. The base read, For the ones who left doors open behind them. I placed it on the windowsill. Let the morning light catch it. Sometimes that's enough. Playcans. The last thing I built was not for the world. It was a school. Small. No press. 12 students at a time. Girls from the nearby valley. Girls who didn't know what a foundation was. Girls who thought Florence was just where tourists went. We didn't teach them business. We taught them voice. How to name what they wanted. How to tell the truth without apology. How to stand still and let the world rearrange itself around them. Some of them will go far. Some will stay. But all of them will carry the map. And that's all I ever wanted. My last book didn't have my name on the cover. It was a collaboration. Each chapter written by a girl who had come through Phoenix, Warner Future, or Quiet Circle. I wrote the foreword. 2 paragraphs. The final sentence read, Pam's asterisk, you don't need me anymore, but I needed you. Thank you for building the world I once only dreamed of. Snack. Hike. The final page turned in silence. No applause. No anthem. Just a woman, in a cottage, with a dog, watching the sky, and knowing, finally, that she was whole. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.